Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Experts Interview on Role Model Maker. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer. And today with me, I have a friend of mine. Her name is Jennifer Cunningham. She is a reputation repair coach, and I'm going to let her talk all about it in just a minute. But when I had my conversation with her, I really liked how she showed up in the world and her message. And I thought that her information and what she does could be beneficial to some of our role models out there. So I appreciate you guys for being here with us and watching. And Jennifer, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today. First, tell us where you're from and a little bit about yourself and how you got to do what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I live in the world in Orange County, California, in the West Coast, in between San Diego and Los Angeles. And my my company or my coaching is called Reputation Repair Coach, and I really kind of trying to sum it up in a couple of sound bites. I really help folks with the emotional impact of what I call public trauma. So anything that's kind of happened to people, maybe online, where they've been humiliated, maybe shamed as a part of maybe cyberbullying or other factors. Those are the people that I work with.
I see. Now, Jennifer, I know that there's always a story, and I heard your story, and this was a powerful one, and this is actually a testament to, uh, all the education system and everybody else that is out there basically and putting their hearts into it. So tell us that story because I thought that was very moving and your compassion and the way you approached it. So tell us about that.
So I work in higher education, and at the time that what was the impetus of me getting started in this was, we were seeing a lot of cyberbullying among students towards each other online in different forums that the students had set up. And I created a workshop around that issue. First of all, to help students think about, before they're posting something, think about why they're posting this particular thing. Are they doing it to please their friends or their peer group, or do they really have an important message that they want to share, or are they doing it to be vindictive? So really kind of prompting them to ask themselves those questions as a way to filter, do I really want to put this out there? And then that was the first part of the workshop. And then the second part was, okay, if you acted hastily and you put something out there that you now maybe regret, or maybe you didn't word it properly, what steps can you take to then apologize or kind of, resolve whatever conflict that may have arose from that posting? So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. And then, simultaneously, or I would say a little bit after that, I had my own experience kind of around that issue where I was the target of a group of people on my campus that weren't happy with the decision that I had made. And there's a term, kind of in the workplace bullying world called mobbing. And mobbing is when a group of people come together against one person and, attack them. And usually it's in a very public way. So that kind of happened to me.
Wow.
And then simultaneously, I was working with a student who was also experiencing this himself, where, he was experiencing almost the same things that I was as we were working together. So it was a real kind of, cataclysmic events that, made me think about this more. And I'm thinking, as I started thinking about it, I was thinking, wow, this must really be affecting a lot of people. And sure enough, as I started researching it, I saw trends and read stories about this type of thing happening. So that's kind of what propelled me to move in this direction.
So Jennifer, thank you for sharing that. And I think for people out there, they all understand they might have been subjected to bullying at some point during their years of growing up and everything as well. So we all know that that's not a good thing, and we don't like how it feels. But What do you see out there as far as like some of the impact and the effects of bullying? What kind of an impact does it have on people? Is it something that just affects people and have them have low self-esteem, or does it go deeper than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really think it depends on an individual's level of resilience. There's some people maybe, through their own life who have developed amazing coping skills, and they can let these things roll off their back, and just, chalk it up to people, being mean or misunderstanding them. But then there's other people that, as we know, that are maybe more sensitive to those types of things. And that was certainly the case with me. And how it plays out in someone's life, I think, depends on many factors. In my case, I'm an adult, and the things that impacted me were my health and my relationships, and to an extent my career. Now, for a younger person, a teenager, or maybe a student in college, that may affect their self-esteem to a greater extent, or their confidence, or it may play out in different areas. Definitely stress. So they may start abusing substances, or and we've heard, unfortunately, we've also heard of situations where things get so distraught for that person that they either attempt to take their own life or are successful in doing that.
Mm.
And of course, that's not the outcome that anybody wants. So that's another reason why I think this is so important. And it's we're all in this online environment now, and things are it's even worse
Right,
than it was before.
right, right. You're absolutely correct. Actually, my background, my postdoctorate was in neurodevelopmental disorders and autism spectrum disorders. And when I was going through school, we had a rate of occurrence of 1 in 10,000 kids having it. And now that number is down to 1 in 58. And what that also suggests is that the fragility of the nervous system in the population that's growing and now being born is much higher as well. And with that fragility comes more rates of depression and anxiety. And of course, when you have a stressor like what you just described, it can have a greater impact on that person's well being and health, and really their emotional state, as far as what they end up doing as a result, the decision that they could make, especially when they have something like depression or anxiety in an underlying way.
Yeah, and
So, yeah.
I had heard, that it can be even more devastating for people with autism, because maybe they're struggling with that social cue element a little bit more than someone that doesn't, isn't on the spectrum. So it can be probably even more damaging in some cases to someone that's on the spectrum.
Right, that's true. All right, so what are the typical challenges that you see people face, kids or grown-ups for that matter, in the community, both on a personal level as being the bullier and also somebody who gets bullied? What are the challenges that typically you see out there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, things can play out in many different ways, but with young people, it's really that kind of that shame piece, if they're on the receiving end of that kind of treatment, where they really just, maybe they're isolated, and I'm not sure what it's about, but I see that in environments with young people. It's almost like a peer pressure to kind of either get on board with the group that's doing the bullying, or there may be some singular people out there who come to that person's aid and try to support them. So I really think that the challenges are isolation, which then can snowball into other areas, which could include some of those more drastic things, like taking substances to kind of relieve the stress and to cope that way.
Mhm.
And then for adults, it does play out in health. I know in my case, I wasn't sleeping as well as I used to, and then that you know uh, affected, again, my relationships with my husband, for instance. He was very supportive, um, and still, and was always supportive through my experience. But at the same time, I could see him getting weary in listening to how it was impacting me, because he wanted his wife back. He wanted the real me to come back.
Right.
So, and then, on the career front, I had to kind of look at that and say, is it time for me to move out of this environment, or is this something that I can, overcome, that may, add to my resilience? And, that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I thought, there's leaders in the world, often have to get through very painful things that are much more painful than what I experienced. And I don't want to I don't want to diminish what I experienced, because for me, it was very real. But to someone else, what I went through probably wouldn't be that, traumatic. And then in terms of the bully, how the challenges for the bully, I think when someone is playing that role, they're, maybe usually struggling with their own insecurity issues, and they see a way in attacking someone else, a way to kind of make themselves feel better about themselves. Usually it's very short-lived, and often what you see is people get weary of the bullying attitudes as well, and sometimes that group can end up turning on the bully. And I think you'll find that a lot more in the workplace setting, but I think too in some environments. I think too, like with younger people, with particularly maybe junior high or high school kids, if there's an adult that is respected and well liked by the student, that person stepping in and kind of reframing the issue for students, I think that can really be helpful too, where the students will then kind of step back and say, yeah, this isn't right what we're doing. And we don't want it to get to that point where someone takes their own life.
Right. I'm assuming that, I mean, a big part of this is conflict resolution at its core in the beginning part, but then the aftermath of, if you cannot resolve a problem properly, how do you go about dealing with your emotions, the other person, and everything else? I know that my mom actually, during the latter part of her career, she was going through similar issues, basically, where it was consuming her mentally and physically. She would wake up with panic attacks, and she had to go to the doctor for extra therapies and sessions, basically, and medication and all kinds of things, because it consumes your time. Even if you're trying to go through the right channels to try to repair, it still requires effort and time. And if you're really stressed for all of those things, that just puts more stuff on your plate, right? So in that sense, what are your tips and secrets when it comes to handling these challenges that you see, be it at workplace, be it at school, and other scenarios?
Yeah, there's some basic coping tips that I think, most, therapists and people that work in the helping professions would suggest. And, one of them is, well, I mean, I think the first one is to be able to talk about what happened, but there's kind of a limit to that. I think, you want to feel heard, but, working with a trained person, either a coach or a therapist, that person, the best remedy is for that person to know, okay, we've gone through the story enough. It's time to, or gently suggest that it's time to move on to the healing part, right?
Mm.
So that's kind of the first thing is, really letting that person, if you're a support person, letting that person tell their story. That's very important to feel heard. And then, the next tip, again, a very basic one, but so helpful in terms of purging those things, is writing. So, and, I know in my case, I had a lot of feelings that I wanted to write for lack of a better word, revenge letters, and I never intended on sending these things, but it was very helpful for me to just write about all the ways that, I felt betrayed. So that can be really effective. If you're, for instance, if you're the bully, you might do the same thing but write an apology letter. Whether or not you send it, I guess it would be beneficial, right? If the bully were able to send it, but just writing that apology may help the person get in touch with their own, or get back in touch with their own humanity and their sense of, what made me do this? And, this isn't the person that I want to be. And again, all of those factors, if you can have, excuse me, if you can have someone helping you and guiding you through those processes, you might not think to do those things on your own, but if you understand, the objective, the ultimate goal in those exercises, I think that can be really helpful. For, kind of switching back and forth for the target of the bully, I think in my work, what I do is I offer to, or I assign exercises in positive psychology. And what that does is helps the person get back in touch with their confidence and the things that they've overcome in their life, and helping them to kind of see that the inner resilience is there. So those are a few things.
Got it. I once heard, and this was more about abuse, but let me know if this also applies to the target of a bullying incident, that they say the last stage or the last phase of getting over and regaining your control is actually forgiveness. Is that the same, or is this hold true in this particular scenario as well?
I think ultimately that is the desired goal. Sometimes it takes people a long time to get to that point.
Right,
I
exactly.
know in my case, there were lots of people that I had to forgive, and I may feel very forgiving one day and then revert back to, and so it's a process that
Right.
one may have to come back and forth to. And I have equated it a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with, the stages of grief, but it's almost similar to the stages that one goes through when they've lost a loved one, or if
Mm,
they're battling some type of terminal illness. Those stages where you're kind of in denial at first, and then you accept it, and then maybe there's an anger stage,
mm.
and then hopefully you just are able to release it somehow. Doesn't mean that you're never going to go back there,
Right.
but if you can go through that process
Mhm.
several times, I think it's easier to get to that forgiveness stage. And of course that, depends on our own, spiritual awareness and things that we, do in our lives on a regular basis anyway.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
the hard thing is when people let these experiences consume them and they never get over it, and
Mm,
they're defined by it for years or maybe their entire life. That's the saddest thing, and that's what I don't want anyone to experience, is to let something like this define them,
right.
and to move on.
Right.
And
It,
I
become,
just
it
one
becomes
little,
like
like,
part of their identity or something. And
yeah, exactly. And they repeat their story to
right,
whoever will listen.
right.
But when there's one kind of little saying that I heard, I don't think it's a quote, but something along the lines of, what happened to you is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility.
Mm,
So, maybe you were victimized and it had nothing to do with anything you did, but you're still responsible for your own healing.
powerful, powerful. I like that. So, Jennifer, tell us a little bit more about your work and what you specifically do as well.
Yeah. So, I work with people around this area of public trauma, which can be, bullying, cyberbullying, could also be like a unexpected job loss. It could be something that happens on social media, maybe a false accusation. It could be a defamation. It could be, there's this more popular term, cancel culture, where if someone expresses an opinion about something and kind of the masses don't like it, then that person is, quote, canceled and basically, just maligned online. And, when I do presentations, I often, refer to Monica Lewinsky and her story. And Monica Lewinsky, if you don't know, was someone, a Washington, D.C. intern during the Clinton administration. She was 22 years old, I think, and she got caught up in an affair with the president of the United States. And there's, we could talk about who was at fault there and all of that, but really she was kind of, patient zero in this whole cyber world of where one day you have a normal life and then the next day your life is a total, is ruined. And because at that point in time, the internet was still, and social media was just getting going. And she really had to bear a heavy load. I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that, but those are the kind of situations that I
Counseling,
help
you were talking
people
about.
get through. Is these public things where you're trying to explain yourself and you're trying to say argue your case, and it just caves in on you,
Right.
and there's no way to get out of it. So
Got
yeah,
it. Yeah, I think you were talking about canceling. Then
yeah,
that's what.
exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, where you just become nobody. or you go viral and then everyone in the world hates you. I mean, recent incidents of this is the woman in Central Park with the gentleman who was bird watching, and she called the police on this man that was doing his thing, and overnight that woman became an enemy. She lost her job, and I'm not saying that she was right in doing what she was. That's not even the point. The point that I'm trying to make is overnight her life was ruined, maybe by her own actions, but in this virtual or this world where millions of people can look in on a situation, it's very traumatic.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it. How can people find out more about what you do and get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you. So my website, reputationrepaircoach.com. You'll find a little bit more about my story, and read about kind of, I don't really talk about the method, but I do offer a free consultation for everyone that it might be interested in working with me, or if you have a child, or well, maybe not a child, but a young adult or young person who needs some help, a free consultation, and then we decide together if it's the right fit, because sometimes it's just not the right fit. Maybe someone would be better served by a public relations firm or a therapist. And so when I'm in those consultations, I think it's a certain type of person that's kind of ready to maybe move on or get help moving on.
Mhm.
And then I also offer a free guide. So it's Reputation Repair Coach / free guide. And I give you about 6 tips and a couple of which I've talked about today in, kind of moving forward in your life.
Awesome.
So that's my contact. And I welcome anyone who feels this could be beneficial to them.
Awesome. I appreciate you giving us that. Guys, I want to make sure that you check it out. I'm going to put it in the description box. So go there. All of Jennifer's contact information and the gift is going to be there for you guys. And I appreciate you guys for being here and being with us. Jennifer, any final words and pearls of wisdom for our audience before we finish this session?
Yeah, there's a quote that I really think is fitting here. It's from a man named Brian Stevenson. And, the beginning is his quote, and then I added a little bit on to the end. But Brian Stevenson is a man who had produced a documentary called Just Mercies. And I think it's been out for about a year, and it's really about the kind of the school to prison pipeline. And the quote is, "We're not the worst thing that we've ever done, nor the worst thing that's ever happened to us." So I really like that, in that, again, going back to that point of, don't let these things define you. you have a life, you need to get back on track. These things, these types of experience, just like for me, this type of experience propelled me into a new thing. It propelled me into a new area. And sometimes those things are the most important ones in someone's life if you can overcome them.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking time out to be with us today. And for our audience members, I appreciate you guys for being here with us. And we look forward to seeing you guys on future episodes. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. L. Thank you.
Cheers.